Hi, everyone. Free agency in the NHL officially opened up today, and there were moves all around the league. Sophia, Billy, Razor, and Brick with you guys in studio to go over everything that the Bruins did. Obviously, we're going to take a big picture look at the league. And guys, since the trade deadline, we have been talking about what this retool was going to look like for the Boston Bruins. We knew it was happening then. We needed to figure out the coach. We have that answer. We wanted to see if the Bruins were going to keep their 7th draft pick. They did, and they drafted. We know Steve Spott is the assistant coach. And now the final questions were, are they going to make some big splashes, big moves in free agency? Of course, we're going to go over the details with you guys at home. But Brick, having all those question marks answered now, what do you make of the Bruins heading in to 2024?
Yeah, in a recap, I would say they think they got the right guy for the right job as far as their head coach. I think they felt pretty solid about their efforts and the due diligence that they did on the draft. I think they wanted to stay, with that draft capital, not only this year, but the following 2 years with the multiple first rounders. And now keep in mind, they're still in the trade market, and that could be part of what they do when they do opt to decide to get into that trade market. But as far as today, July 1, free agency, they had so many holes to fill in their roster, and they tried to do it with quality people, NHL experienced guys, and to fill out that roster. But what they filled out, I felt like, was, and I don't like the term bottom 6, but the 3rd and 4th line. I like Arvidsson as a player. He's a top 9, not a top 6 for me. I think the top 6 forward and a top 4 defenseman, they didn't really dive into that free agency market. Not that it was a free agent market overflowing with high-end skill.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Razor?
Well, to that point, we were here doing the draft night, and okay, there might be some big names. Then they came off the board real quick. They came off the board on June 30th. So it really took the sting out of free agency and what it looked like around the entire league. And I think what we saw today were a lot of that middle 6 type player that was available that the Bruins needed to fill a roster out. They had so many holes that I'm happy with the amount of players they were able to get. I'm happy with the depth they were able to build within their team. It wasn't on the high end because those guys weren't out there, but there are much more competitive positions going into training camp for both young and older guys.
Yeah, and I don't think they were tempted to go out and make a grand deal with anybody. Maybe they talked to a former Boston Bruin who just won the Stanley Cup. Who knows? Maybe, but I think they probably didn't get anywhere, going back to Florida for Marchand. But the other guys, the one guy out there, we talked about it off here too, Nick Ehlers. That'd be the one guy that I think would be worth going for. I don't see that happening, right? He hasn't signed, as of this sitting right now, he hasn't made his decision just yet. But the other 2 or 3 top players, not going to go for them. And I'm glad that they didn't. With all that said, I still think there's moves to be made and necessary. Brick talked about top offensive guys, maybe some defense help still right there. Whether they can get that or not before the season begins, I don't know. That could be tough.
As you guys both mentioned, free agency opens up on the 1st, but it's not over. There are still moves that trickle in as teams figure out the holes that they still need to fill. So who are the guys talking about? Let's show you the moves that they made today. We're going to go over all of them, most of them in detail. So I'm not going to get into that right now. The guys are going to come back. But first, let's hear from the GM and Don Sweeney, who spoke around 5:36 this evening.
Then we went to work on finding, as I referenced, last week, that we were going to put together a competitive team with bringing some juice back in here, and that applies to bringing our, the elevating our current guys and them feeling reinvigorated coming off of some injuries and a very down year, and just the responses I've had from those guys and realizing how excited some of these guys are to get here, and maybe it is from the bottom up, but the juice is coming, and we expect to be a much more competitive team. And the improvements now come from within. But make no mistake, if a younger player has the opportunity to make our team, he's making our team. I think we did that 2 years ago, and Poitras is a good example of making room. There's room. There's just the competition is there, and that's what we want. That's what I talked to Marco about through the whole coaching search, and even leading on the whole days leading up to today. We were, at times last year, even when we had our group, we were an easy out, and I can't stand for that. So we are going to reestablish that, and I said that's part of again, when you have iconic players and people that are driven, that we've had the fortune of having and leading our group here for a long period of time, the next group needs to really, really embrace that. We had injuries, there was a factor involved in that, but now we've infused that. We have guys that are self-starters. We have guys that are going to show up in practice. We have guys that are going to show up when the whistle blows and drag people in with them. And if they aren't dragged in, then they won't play.
Well, Don Sweeney, guys, as always, talks for about 30 minutes. He had a lot to say, but we felt here, the producer and I felt that this was a clip or couple clips that really stood out to us. The internal competition, fighting for jobs. Brick, you kind of mentioned that with kind of loading up on the bottom 9. What do you make of this? You know, guys, there's not a roster spot for everyone that they acquired, so they really have to fight for it.
Yeah, it's the ultimate team sport, and I totally get the concept of creating that competition at training camp in order to field the best team you possibly can. But, you know, this game has changed in so many different ways, and as it evolves, you have to either keep up with the evolvement or get ahead of the evolvement if you're going to be a quality team. But some things don't change. Goaltending, team defense, strength down the middle. Those are the areas I need to see major improvement from this Boston team to be what we expect the Bruins to be, because they've been, the great Bruins teams have always had those 3 elements. And that's what I think the Bruins need to address most.
And that's what makes it a little difficult to really know where they are, because of the fact they thought they were going to get better from those positions last year, and from the guys that are still here. Right. And that are here weren't going anywhere. There was no way to change Jeremy Sweeney in your goaltending. You just need a better effort from him next year. So that's where that incomplete card kind of sits for us as well, where they need a big jump from those guys. And Don talked about it. The guys that were here and have been here have to take it to another level.
Yeah, and these are all nice complementary players that they've brought in, that they all, in theory, if they play well, I mean, it'd be awesome if they all had career years. If Tanner Jeannot scored 25 goals, you know, to get a career high. Whether that happens or not, you want them to play well, but it's the guys that we know can be. But we know that Hampus Lindholm, when healthy, should add, right? Charlie McAvoy, you hope. We talked, I remember all of us sitting the other direction perhaps last year about how McAvoy we thought would have this major year, and he needs to have a better year for this team to be better. But when it's all said and done, I'm looking at the goalie union right here. It's going to start with Sway. It's going to start with him, and then start with that, and then the team defense in front of him will have to be better. And
because of Swayman's contract being as big as it is, and you know they obviously made him the #1 goalie, but there's still competition, right? He's not saying he's fighting for the job because it's his, but we're hoping that there's a bit of a push.
Well, I mean, again, the push is coming from him, of course. To your point, he's not going to Providence next year.
Right.
But no, Joonas Korpisalo pushed him last year at times, and I think that competition might be a little bit more open, just the way things went last season and the comments from Don and at the end of the season. But certainly their goaltending position has to be better.
All right, guys. Morgan Geekie was one of the big names that Don Sweeney was asked about before the draft. Are they going to get it done before July 1st? And they did indeed. As you take a look at his numbers over the last 2 seasons, the asterisk means career highs in pretty much every important category. We're going to discuss Geekie and what this means, locking him up for 6 years, $5.5 million a year. But first, let's hear from him when he addressed the new contract.
You're kind of penciled in for a little bit longer term with the team. You kind of take on responsibilities like that, and we have a really good group of leadership. Z and Lindy and other Lindy and C-Mac and Dave. So Sway and those guys, all the guys that have been around before I got here. It seems to have changed a little bit, but it's good. Taking on responsibility like that is something that kind of comes with the territory of evolving your game and being someone to be relied upon. So for me, I think, I'm trying to grow into that. I'm a little more reserved and not super outgoing, but, I think with a younger team, I have a younger brother, Connor, who plays for Tampa Bay and played with Syracuse this year. And I think, we have a good relationship and I try to stay out of his way, but I think, my relationship with him allows me to maybe, bridge the gap between, the older guys and the younger guys, just because I have a little bit of, obviously some history with, that age of kid. So I think, the game's changing a lot, but I think I'm kind of, around the perfect age right now where I can kind of, field both sides. So it's, I'm super excited to, take that next step as as a leader and be involved in the room a little bit more. So, like I said, I'm just trying to come in and, not trying to change myself too much, just, try to do the best I can for the team.
Billy, I was going to ask you what you thought about the numbers of that contract, but really quick, based on his answer, talking about being one of the leaders, do you think he's going to get an A this year on the sweater?
That I don't know. Marco Sturm and other coaches will figure out what they're going to do. Wouldn't surprise me if they start without a captain. They have a couple of A's to go with. Another conversation
for another
time. But I love Fellas Brick, Razor. I love this deal. He bet on himself, so to speak. I know that Seattle a couple years didn't offer him, but he wanted more. He made it clear he wanted more of an opportunity. And I call him a kid because he's a lot younger than me, but he's an older young guy now. I love the way he performed. He played so well with Posh. He was able to connect with him. And I don't know if it's as easy as some people think it is to be able to do that. And some of the goals that he scored, fellas, were hard goals. I mean, these were not just, he had some tap-ins, don't get me wrong, some great passes. But the chemistry that he was able to develop, I don't think you can take that for granted, Brick.
Well, there's so many things to like about this story, his perseverance and his desire and his drive to be the best possible version of himself, and lessons learned early in the year from being a healthy scratch to finishing the season as one of the most impressive goal scorers in the entire league, not just with the Boston Bruins. I like his maturity. I like his hockey IQ. He's stronger than you think. He's a little faster than you think. And I think you have to be able to understand all the moving parts, particularly in offense, in order to be an effective shooter and a goal scorer. And that was where the greatest growth of his game came in the second half.
And just quickly to add on that, he's a guy who can beat a goaltender with his shot.
Yes.
And that's why those 33 goals you can do that. He can replicate that because he's one of the few guys that can beat a goalie with his shot down the wing. And we saw that, and his confidence built with that one-timer. And that really goes a long way in this league. Because there's been guys that have scored 30 goals in this league that had it go off their back, their knees, their legs, and got lucky. This guy can shoot it, and he can score.
And really quick, before we get to Viktor Arvidsson, the numbers, we like it, right? Fair for Geekie and fair for the team?
That was a very fair deal.
Very, very fair deal.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Trade today, Viktor Arvidsson coming from Edmonton. He's entering the second year of a 2-year, $8 million contract. The left winger, and in return, the Oilers got a 5th-round pick in 2027. 7 points in the playoffs, guys, as you know. Edmonton going all the way with LA and Nashville before that. What do we make of where he could fit in with the Boston Bruins this season, Brick?
Well, the first thing that jumps out to me, I like the player. I've always liked this guy, not that I've seen him play a ton over the years, but anytime I've watched him play, the thing that jumps out to me the most is in the most highly competitive games and situations is when he plays his best. And he can help you win a lot of games even when he doesn't have his A game because he's got a completeness to the way he plays the game.
And he's got a relationship with Marco Sturm, which I think is very interesting. You absolutely know there was intel there. He knows exactly what it takes to get Viktor Arvidsson to tick and to go. He knows exactly how to communicate with him, being on the bench and being on the plane, being around him. So there's knowledge there, and certainly Marco okayed this deal and really believes in this player if he's coming in there.
1-year term left. That's it.
Yeah.
He's to have a big season there. Exactly. He's got one deal left. You know what I mean? He's got one bigger deal left for him. And with the cap going up, he's going to want his share of the pie, so to speak. So hopefully, he had a up and down year with Edmonton, and he was at times really good for them in the playoffs, and other times he was scratch as they were trying to find the right mix there. He loves to shoot. Bruins need to shoot more. We saw that. We lived through that all too often last year where they didn't shoot a lot. He loves to shoot. He loves to be out there. Not big, but willing to play a physical interior game. He's not going to bowl you over, but he'll get to the middle of the ice. If he can get his 25 goals going, Brick, again, that's a good year for him and for the Bruins.
Well, let me ask you guys this. If Casey Mittelstadt's going to be on this Bruins team and he's going to be, your second-line center, we said at the end of last year, what does he need? He needs a bona fide NHL guy on the wing that can understand the give and go and how to get him the puck, Mittelstadt that is, in the spots that he needs to have it in order to be an effective playmaker. And I think a guy like Arvidsson kind of fits that bill. That's the kind of NHL player I was looking for that could helpfully complement and make Mittelstadt a more effective, impactful player.
I love this read you guys have on him, and we'll have to see what he does this season. But he actually already spoke to the media after the trade and when he learned he was going to join the Boston Bruins. So let's play that for you.
I've talked to him briefly, and obviously, like I said, we've known each other, and I've been playing under him as he was my power play coach in LA, and I just think he sees the game really well, and he played it, and he gets it. So I think that's going to be a really good coach for the team and for a young group that we are, and pushing for playoffs and that kind of stuff.
Kevin Dupont.
Victor, I know from looking back over your record, you played with both Lindholms years ago in some cases. What do you remember of playing with them, and have you talked to them recently about coming here?
No, I play with Elias in the Four Nations, and I think we had some good chemistry, and we played on the fourth line, which is a little bit different, I think, for both of us. So it was fun, and Hampus in the junior teams, and so I know them a little bit since before. So that's good to have when you come to a new team. So it's gonna be fun, and it's gonna be really excited.
At the start of that clip, he was talking about Marco Sturm, his experience with him. One thing we know for sure, he's not going to be wearing number 33 with the Boston Bruins, so we'll have to get a new number. Guys, we've got to send it to break, but we're going to be right back. I will admit I was delusional. I thought Brad Marchand might become a Bruin again, but no. He inked it up with the Florida Panthers. That team keeping a lot of their Stanley Cup winning players, and we'll show you other moves around the league. Right after the break, we'll be right back. Welcome back. There were a lot of moves made in the NHL, around the NHL today. We're kind of focusing mostly on the future opponents, or the Atlantic Division opponents of the Boston Bruins. Let's start with the Florida Panthers. As you guys can see, Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, Aaron Ekblad back. Then you have the Leafs and a couple of signings of the Detroit Red Wings and the Ottawa Senators as well. So everyone talking about the Florida Panthers being able to get it done, keeping guys that were impactful to win a second straight Stanley Cup, and now gunning for a third. Brick, what do you make of there? Before July 1st, by the way, these getting it all wrapped up. What do you make of this team?
Well, impressive what they've done to be able to hang on to the whole, keep the band together for another season, go for the three-peat. But I think we all thought that once Bennett signed that either Marchand or Ekblad was going to be available. There's no way they can get all three under contract and keep them down in Florida. Yeah, that's our focus. You want the Bruins to be a top 3 team in the division in order to secure a playoff spot. So you keep an eye on what's happening around the division, what teams are doing in terms of free agency, trades, drafting, whatever it might be. Florida is still the team to beat. It almost seems like you're going to have to go through Florida if you're going to win the Eastern Conference.
No question. And they might do it with 89 points in the regular season or 92 or like they're going to cruise. They just will. You know they will. They're going to be partying right into October. But at the end of the day,
sounds fun.
They're the team. South Beach, beautiful. Elbow room. Nothing better. Nothing better.
It makes me sad that Elbow Room's on the map now because it was a nice place to kind of go out. Now everyone knows about it. But whatever. Anyway, as you were.
Yeah, I've always watched on the video.
Yeah, the weird video. Yes. There's a live stream of
Elbow
Room, by the way.
Elbow Room live stream.
But yes, as you were before.
Well, no. So they're the team. There's no question, and especially come April, they're there. Now, what about Toronto? Did they get better? They lose Mitch Marner. They had the same issue that a lot of other teams that wanted to fill a high skill position through free agency. There just wasn't anything there. They lose Marner, and no one else to get back. So that'll be interesting, that dynamic in Toronto. Can their goaltending hold up? Detroit got better. I think we all agree that Montreal was the team that got better the most in the Atlantic Division over the last few days.
Yeah, and ahead of schedule to make the postseason a year ago.
And yeah, they're not resting on that.
And it kind of changed maybe how they attack.
Yeah, exactly. So listen, the NHL, Brick, you said it right off the top. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And that's what this league's all about. And the teams in the Atlantic Division are no different.
Yeah, with regard to the Atlantic, I think this is going to be a battle for the Bruins to make that final playoff spot. I do. I think it's going to be tough, and I think that's going to be the big challenge. Now, you could say that about a couple of other teams too, but I do think Montreal's better. I think Ottawa, I think they're going to have to be a little bit better too, just with maturity. Another year there, they've added pieces the last 2 years that have made them a better team. What's Detroit? I'm not sure about them. I know they got a goaltender in Gibson. Where's his mindset? It should be in a good place. It seemed like he kind of wanted out of Anaheim, although on his terms the last couple of years. How good will he be there? One thing I want to say about Florida, I think the key to being able to sign all 3 guys there was that Ekblad took 6.1. I think with him, Bennett was going to get what Bennett got, because Bennett could have gotten 10 or 11, it sounds on the open market.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask, reading a little bit about that, this is a deal, the steal to get Bennett for that.
Right, and Ekblad now, because Ekblad would have gotten 8.5 plus on the open market too. I don't know, maybe 5-6 years. But Bennett, yes, was important, very important. But then after that, Ekblad taking 6, I think it was 6.1, it left just enough for Brad to get his, and Brad wanted the term, or the amount of money, so to speak. The term, it shocked 6 years, right? It shocked all of us. But we all know that it's a lot of upfront money that he's going to get. I think it's the first 3, if not 4 years. And then after that, it's very minimal kind of money.
And all those contracts, all those fellas that we're talking about right now, I mean, you go down the list, I mean, everybody's there through 2030.
Yeah.
Everybody. Like all the way to Luosterainen and Lundell. Like,
exactly.
Wow, what a masterpiece.
The only player that they don't have.
No, the best part is, this is the best part.
I know where you're going.
The best part is Bob Broski's the only one not. He's going to take half as much to stay. They're actually going to get $10 million coming off the books from him. He's going to sign a 8 years, $5 million extension, and it'll be right on par with everybody else. So they're actually going to be capped. They'll have some room next year, which is scary.
And that isn't because it's a tax-friendly state.
That's because
they win. That's because they win.
Yeah.
Yes, you can justify. All right, well, yeah, if I'm making 6 here, that would be 7 point something somewhere else. But they're all staying there because they're winning, and they're all going to party until 2030, Brick.
And there's a theory that you still need to make changes each and every year, right?
Yes.
So they've already made a little bit of a tweak, right? Nate Schmidt out, Jeff Petrie in. You know what I mean? So it's happening. Yeah, they got the whole band back together, but they still will tweak that line.
And your point, they got 1 or 2 young guys that were pushing this year. Samoskevich is the kid that comes to mind most importantly for them. And he'll get more and more inroads with that team too. So they'll have enough new blood every year, and somehow they'll figure out a way to add somebody else to
And
it.
the other thing is they're the first team in the salary cap era to have won in the perfect time where the cap has exploded, where they were able to make it happen. Everyone else, cap was going up $1 million a year, $2 million a
That's
year.
so
Flat
true.
during COVID.
The
and
Chicago,
Tampa wins twice.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
they just couldn't keep it going because they didn't get that $10 million bump.
Right.
Florida's just landed in a perfect timing where they've been able to do that as well, that none of the other teams have, and that's given them this opportunity.
And then there's no tax.
And there's no tax.
And
then. But
palm trees.
that's not the first. And palm trees.
And
right.
palm trees.
But
And
that's
golf.
not the
Golf
first.
cart to the practice rink doesn't hurt.
No.
Really quick, we are going to throw it to break, but really quick, you guys talked about they're winning, so you're taking a little less. You guys know I only got here 6 years ago, but was that kind of happening in the Bergeron, Chara, Marchand era when were they taking a little less for a chance to win?
Yeah, and when you want to keep it together and you understand the value of every player and you're not keeping score on dollars and cents with the rest of the league because you want to win, you value winning, and that was the leadership of that locker room, that culture that was so envied across the league. And I think you're seeing teams like Florida, follow that model right now.
Yeah. All right,
Vegas
guys.
seems to be there too.
Yes.
Even though they only won once, but it seems to be they have some of that same type of image as well.
Well, I mean, I know getting paid is very important, but these guys grew up playing to win. And so if you have a chance to do that and you take just a little less, not an egregious amount, it makes sense to stay together and give yourselves that best chance. And that's what Florida is doing. We have to send it to break. Sean Kuraly, a familiar face, familiar guy with the Boston Bruins. He is back with the Bees next season. So we're going to discuss him and again, go down the lineup, take a closer look at this new look Bruins team after this. Welcome back to the show. We are recapping the Bruins moves today as free agency officially opened up. Happy Canada Day, by the way, to myself, because you guys are American.
No.
Wait.
Are you serious? I'm from Belleville, Ontario,
Canada. Razor, I forgot.
my
I'm
How
sorry.
quickly she forgets.
Dude,
huh?
I'm sorry. I got to
Wow.
redo. Can we redo this?
That
Okay.
was
Pretty wrecked,
that
Eric.
was traitorous.
Way to go.
Oh, God. All right. I'm going to apologize and break here. Anyway, happy Canada Day to myself
Happy
and
4th
Razor.
in a few days.
Yeah,
really?
I got. I'll just hold my American passport here. That's fine. That's
Dude,
fine.
I'm sorry. I got to do a redo here. Anyway, as we were, Sean Kuraly, these are the moves. Tanner Jeannot, we're going to discuss him and the physicality. Sean Kuraly.
He's American.
Familiar face. He is American. With the Boston Bruins, played here until 2021 from 16-17. He's 32 years old now, 17 points last season. So not exactly a splash, guys. Brick, I like starting with you. What's your take on this move?
Well, the player itself, familiarity, that's not a bad thing for the player coming back to Boston. He had a good experience here, I believe. Plays center, plays with pace, good penalty killer. He's pretty decent in the face-off circle. Depth guy, quality human being. He'll be good in the room. Is it a major upgrade skill-wise? No.
No, great news. He played 82 games last year, so he's getting a little bit older, but he's still finding his way around. He knows how to stay healthy, stay available, right? And just a good guy. We're gonna talk to him so much, right? He's gonna do so many interviews. Yep. He's very well spoken. He's a good voice on that bottom six. We've talked so much when the Folignos were here of having leadership at the top of the lineup, but leadership at the bottom of the lineup's just as important. That's where Sean Kuraly fits.
Yeah, he's really well respected by his teammates. In the sense of because he's got positive personality, he has a good time there. So it's great to have him back. He's wonderful for the media. He is. He's great there. I know he's excited to come back to Boston. He loved his time here, and he was a fan favorite. He was in Columbus because he's a Columbus kid. I'd say who did really well. That's why they signed that 4-year, $10 million contract from Boston.
So happy
and he was
about that
beloved
too.
there. And they're changing. Their team is changing there. So he gets moved on, or he gets to move on, and they add some other younger players there. And now I really, for him coming back here, I think it's great. And for us, it's equally as great getting
for them.
Back.
Yes, no, exactly. And we were joking about him being great with the media, but he's familiar with the culture that they want to make sure they keep. He can help instill that. Like I said, he's 32 years old now, so it can help lead some of the younger guys. I got to suck up to Razor for the rest of the show. So Razor,
yes,
why don't you take?
do.
Yes, I do. Why don't you take this one? Tanner Jeannot, known for his physicality, guys. Look at that 6 that I can count properly in terms of hits over the last 5 seasons. And he's going to bring some physicality, Razor. And what else will he add to this lineup?
He does. What else does he bring? He brings character, one of the most well-liked players in Los Angeles, just being there the 1 year, talking to those guys. He brings the ability. He's a heavyweight throughout the league. He's not going to have a lot of suitors because he's that tough. Another Canadian kid, a Saskatchewan kid, a farm boy. But he's extremely well liked. He's in the top of all of the fitness testing year after year, so he's an influence there with the younger kids coming in to the Boston Bruins that we've talked so much about. So a great character guy. I know the 5 years scare is a little shocking, I suppose, but again, I think it goes back to what we just talked about with Brad Marchand and Aaron Ekblad. It's a way to push the money and move the money around a little bit. At the end of the day, Tanner Jeannot is as tough as they get and as much of an NHL pro as you're going to find as well.
Yeah, 24 goals a couple of years ago with Nashville. 20 goals, guys, combined the last 3 years with 2 teams, one of them being Tampa and LA. And this is a guy that everybody wants him to replicate his first year of 24 goals and 100 PIMs and all that because it was so different. I don't know if he'll get there. I know Don Sweeney talked about it. He's not sure if he'll get there, but if he can get 15, like if he can get back to 15, I am absolutely thrilled. He's as tough as they come. As tough as they come. I think Bruins fans will love that. I also think that this deal you talk about, I think this is probably similar to what they had talks with Trent Frederick about, the same type of deal. They're similar type players. So they want this element in the lineup, and Brick, they're getting it back in their lineup.
Yeah, the goal numbers doesn't really, concern me. Give me 300 plus hits. Give me a forechecking game. Give me some protection for some of the, finesse players in my lineup. And if you're going to drop the gloves, know when to do it, why to do it, and how to do it. And he seems to have that reputation because if you have that element in your lineup, you're a better team.
So now you've got Tanner Jeannot, Mark Kastelik, throw in Nikita Zadorov. Those are 3 big boys that are very capable, and so the team should have that element taken care of.
Yeah, you mentioned no Frederick. Obviously, they didn't extend to Lauko. McAvoy was injured for a lot of the season when we're talking about, and Carlo was traded when we're talking about hits and physicality. So replacing that a little bit there. We've got these guys' thoughts, and we're going to continue that throughout the show, but also Adam Pellerin and Judd Surratt were at Warrior. Let's throw it to them, recapping free agency.
Well, needless to say, a busy day of free agency for the Bruins as they get things underway, making a number of moves, one trade in particular. But hearing Don Sweeney talk about the day, Judd, a couple of things stood out. One, he wants this team to be hard to play against again. He wants the players on the roster to drag guys into the fight. And that's one thing that stood out to me in Sweeney's comments.
Well, one of the things, Adam, thinking of what Don Sweeney, the general manager, had mentioned after the season ended that he wanted to bring in onto the roster as they approached the draft and free agency were some wingers. And the Bruins certainly did that here today. If you want to include Sean Kuraly, essentially they brought in 4 National Hockey League wingers. A guy like Kuraly can toggle between center and on the wing, but all of those, to your point, all of those guys can play a feisty brand of hockey. The other word that the GM used was, I wanted to bring some juice back into the team's game and into that room. And the other thing that he mentioned was that he feels that guys like this can help support the core group of players that the Bruins currently have on their roster.
Let's start with Viktor Arvidsson. Obviously, the trade with Edmonton. There's some familiarity there with Marco Sturm, who was an assistant in LA when Arvidsson was on the roster there. This is a guy that scored 30 goals multiple times in the National Hockey League. He's had some injury problems, but he's someone who they hope can help them on the power play in terms of the net front.
He's the most accomplished player that the Bruins have brought in here on day one of free agency. As you mentioned, a 2-time 30-goal scorer. If you look across his 11-year National Hockey League career, he has averaged 26 goals every 82 games. Injuries have been an issue. A couple of years ago, he had to deal with a back injury. I think when the Bruins saw the Edmonton Oilers this year where he was playing, they only saw him in one of the 2 games. The other thing that the GM Don Sweeney mentioned about a guy like Viktor Arvidsson, he has a lot of experience playing on the power plays. Not the biggest guy at 5'10", but he will go to the high traffic areas. He will be net front. I think that's where the Bruins envision him on the man advantage. He'll go to the high traffic areas. He's willing to win board battles. And again, if he can stay healthy, that's one of the keys for the Bruins. He can help you on the team's second line, maybe on the third line, depending on what presents itself. But for the Bruins, it's a low-risk move, a guy who has 1 more year left on his contract, making only $4 million a season, and all it cost you was a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick a couple of years from now.
The biggest commitment the Bruins made was a 5-year deal to Tanner Jeannot. Obviously brings quite a bit of sandpaper to the table, and hopefully a guy that they hope can provide some protection for some of their skill players.
And I think one of the things that stands out, and I think for a lot of people when they heard the news that Tanner Jeannot was coming to Boston, was the 5-year commitment, making $3.4 million per season. But one of the things that the GM Don Sweeney had pointed out to us when he had a chance to talk with the media is that based on the amount of young players that the Bruins are going to be filtering onto their roster, that they're going to need the support from a guy like Tanner Jeannot. And you've also got Mark Kastelik and Nikita Zadorov who can provide that element, that's going to help some of those young players as they make their way into the NHL and onto the Bruins roster. For a guy like Jeannot, a punishing body checker, one of the heavyweights around the National Hockey League, I think one of the numbers that sticks out is what he was able to do offensively as a rookie in Nashville. That first full season in the NHL, he led all first-year players with 24 goals with Nashville. Now, he's moved on since to play for Tampa, and he played last year for the LA Kings, but I think a lot of teams have been tantalized. Could he get back to that point and bringing you that type of offensive production with that type of physical presence? He hasn't been able to do it. He's also been a guy who at times has had to deal with some injury issues. But the other thing that you mentioned that I think is a point that really we should underscore, and a guy like Marco Sturm has some familiarity there. A guy who was in the Kings system last year, and a guy who also has some familiarity with Viktor Arvidsson, who played there a couple of seasons ago while Marco Sturm was an assistant coach.
Speaking of familiarity, Sean Kuraly, no stranger to Boston, reuniting with the Bruins. Obviously a young player when he was here. Spent the last few seasons with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now he returns to Boston. And again, the Bruins addressing the culture aspect of their roster here.
I think that's definitely one of them. When I think about a guy like Sean Kuraly, when he came up with a batch of rookies in the 17-18 season, that group surprised a lot of people. But Kuraly provides so many different things for your bottom six. He can kill penalties, he can check, he can win faceoffs. He also plays a feisty brand of hockey. He's fast, he's bigger than you think. He can move back and forth between center and wing. And the other thing that I think stood out when when Don Sweeney addressed the media is that he's a guy who understands what it means to be a Bruin. He grew up around a lot of those high culture players, whether that's Chara, Bergeron, Marchand. So he understands what it's supposed to look and sound like. And in addition to that, there's a lot of familiarity with some of the guys who are already a part of your core group, and Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak.
Yeah, Sean Kuraly certainly a fan favorite when he was here in Boston. So a busy day one of free agency for the Bruins, but a lot of offseason left to go.
Guys, thank you very much. Billy, we are giving this to you. I'm not the greatest at numbers over here, but this is their cap projection, their 2025 Bruins offseason cap projection, the salary cap increasing, of course, to $95.5 million. And looks like they've got around $2.9 million of cap space.
It depends on who you have in the lineup and who you don't. Between $2 and $3 million, it looks like. These aren't the lines either. I mean, they could end up being, but you could see some other players around. By the way, I like Razor, you and I talked about this on the pod. Michael Eyssimont, that signing right there. He's got some grit and he'll disturb a bit.
He disturbs
out there,
big time.
which I like that too. And there's another pro type player, but so you got some room to move, and I keep saying this. I mean, they're not. I don't think they're done. Whether they achieved Brick and Razor getting another player before the season or early in the season, I still think they got to find more goals. I do, and the right side of the D is okay. Can they find one more player before the season? Probably, but does it mean they can? I don't know, but at least they got some space right now. And by the way, some players could move up and down, and they've got some flexibility there as well.
Well, I think as more and more free agents sign, it's not all going to happen today in the first 24 hours. I think you'll see some teams really venture into the trade market, and I think that's where the Bruins are. So if you're addressing that area in particular or something else that you're looking for that you want to add, maybe it comes via trade, and some of those names off those boards are involved in those trades. Because one name that's not on that board is that Fraser Mitten kid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he impresses me. Yeah. I think he has an opportunity to make this team out of camp. Maybe he starts in Providence, but my expectation is he's a National Hockey League player.
Can you further that thought? And I'm going to add Matthew Poitras and Fabian Lysell. I know we saw a little bit of Lysell near the end of the season, but just those three guys, Fraser Mitten, are we expecting them? Are we hoping, obviously, that they're more regulars?
Well, of those three players, I think what Poitras did his first year, and Donnie Sweeney has referenced it, he turned some heads because he said, wow, I can play in this league. I can make plays in this league. But there were holes in his game and weaknesses in his game that needed to be addressed. And he had to learn how to be a pro, and he had to do it at the Providence level. Did he make enough strides down in the American League to be a National Hockey League player? That's what training camp's is gonna show us. But of all those three players that you mentioned, Sophia,
yes,
Minton's the guy on top of the list for me.
Yeah, and of course they acquired him at the deadline in the Brandon Carlo trade. We're expecting a much more competitive training camp this season too. That was a theme that was discussed from last year to this year, so it's going to be some exciting stuff. Guys, we're going to send it to break, but we are going to be back. Again, we recapped a bit of today. We're going to look ahead a little bit to the future as well, now that we've got guys inked up to deals and what we can expect from them going forward with the Boston Bruins. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. All right, like I said, we spent a lot of the show going over what the Bruins and the league did today as free agency opened up. But before July 1st, the Boston Bruins inked Morgan Geekie to a 6-year contract worth $5.5 a year. He talked to the media about being back with the Boston Bruins and playing with David Pastrnak.
You know, me and Dave get along really well off the ice, I think, too, which helps a lot. And you know, whenever you play with somebody for a sustained period of time, it obviously your chemistry builds naturally. But you know, we played a little bit together the previous year in the playoffs and stuff. Obviously, under a little bit different circumstance, but you know, it's good. I don't think it's one of those things that needs to like continue to grow. I think naturally with a friendship, that's kind of what happens, and you start to, you know, pick up on each other's tendencies. And I think we did that pretty well. But you know, I think our whole line of, you know, Lindy and Pav, when we were there, I thought we clicked pretty well, the four of us. So, yeah, just, you know, like I said before, just try to keep building on what I, you know, had accomplished towards the end of the year and just try to roll it into the fall. Obviously, Dave's a superstar talent, and you see the way that he's played over his entire career. And you could say the same thing about Lindy. And I think for, you know, me, it felt like when we had Lindy and in the middle of the ice, it just helped kind of maybe calm things down a little bit, and you don't have to worry about so much because he's so reliable on the defensive end. So it kind of frees you up to play a little bit more open and stretch the ice a little bit. And I think that's where we kind of excelled as a team. And I think that you saw that towards the end of the year. The success we had was just, you know, being able to kind of play free with confidence and, you know, not give up too much in our own end, and just, you know, continue to grow our chemistry together as a line.
All right, I want to address something that, you know, you can read about, and I know you're not supposed to go on Twitter all the time, but the only, I don't want to use the word criticism, but maybe the only angle that people could find criticism with Morgan Geekie, guys, was where they were saying, well, he played with David Pastrnak. When you play with the best player in the world, you're going to get better. Sure, that's true. But we also saw Pavel Zacha play with David Pastrnak. He didn't have the year he wanted. Elias Lindholm as well didn't have the year he wanted. Jake DeBrusk had a lot of time with Pastrnak. Didn't do wonders for him like it apparently did for Morgan Geekie. So how do you make of that situation? Was Morgan Geekie better because of David Pastrnak? I think we can say yes, but it's not just because of David Pastrnak.
No, but it's going to help your offensive numbers, clearly. Anytime you play with a great player, your offensive numbers are going to improve. It's how much do they improve and why do they improve and what do you see in Geekie's game? I understand that people want to criticize. I get it, you know, especially when a guy signs a deal and you're not sure he's going to really live up to that as far as the dollar value goes. But what he showed us was he can play with really good players, and that's really all that matters.
You have to earn the trust of star players like that, right? Yep. Brick, you played with some great players, and these guys are different. They are just different. And there was natural, we talked much earlier in the show about the chemistry, but also I just think the trust that Geekie showed because he can finish from different places, because he could read off Dave, and as he likes calling him Dave, I love it, and Dave could read off him. That was really important. I think he got that trust, and I don't think he can look past that. And that's nothing that you can just say anybody can do that.
No, exactly.
Because that doesn't always happen.
No, it doesn't. There's so many occasions of guys that can't play or good players that just say, I can't play with this guy. Like, it's fun. That happens. That conversation happens with coaches all the time. I can't, this guy doesn't know where he's supposed to be on the ice. I can't read where he's going to be. And that's where Geekie proved and got the trust of David, but also excelled, and he continued to grow throughout the regular season. By the end, they were really finding plays and the seam plays, and not only was David hitting one-timers, but Morgan was hitting one-timers, and it just lined up really well. They play the same way, they have the same ideas out on the ice, and that, to your point, Brick, is what gives the optimism, because that won't go away. They can continue to grow through that.
And I think one of the things that really stood out to us when we watched that last half of the season with those two playing together was how good a playmaker Pastrnak can be when he's playing with a guy that's shot ready. You know, Morgan Geekie was shot ready the minute he came across the blue line, and that's why he had, 30 plus.
And Elias Lindholm, we talked about how as a team, it didn't really matter that he was racking up the points at the end, but individually that did something for him, and we don't know where he's going to slot in, but we're expecting the three of them will play together.
Well, we're talking about free agency today, right? July 1st. Go back a year ago, July 1st. Now, both those players, the expectations that come when you get overpaid, overtermed, which is usually what happens at noontime on July 1st, they'll be much better this year. Don't you believe that there'll be much better players, more complete players in the second year of this contract?
Sure, hope so. More relaxed players from the get-go. And, you brought up training camp being more competitive. I know we got ways to go until mid-September, but let's just hope the training camp in general is better for this Bruins team, because it was a factor A lot of factors went into it, but it was disjointed. And hopefully with these players being set that you talk about coming back, and hopefully some good, veterans coming in, like they signed today, that they have a more fluid training camp, more beneficial training camp.
Let me ask you guys this. So, if you think the Bruins are in the trade market, and I think we all believe that they are,
absolutely
exploring every opportunity to continue to get better and improve their talent level across the board, do you start targeting teams that are looking to be bad next year for the purpose of getting into the
McKenna
number one pick draft sweepstakes?
You do.
And do you target those teams that have real good NHL players that they may want to take off their roster?
And you have an extra first-round pick next year that we've talked ad nauseum since March 7th, since trade deadline, when they accrued that draft capital, that now they have assets that they can utilize in multiple different ways.
The other thing which is I didn't think this was going to be the case, but with the signings today, there's a lot of different kind of players that a good team might want to fill in on a 2-year contract with a little less money. If I can't find a way to sign all my my great players, or I get hung up on a centerman that just doesn't fit, and I want a guy like Tanner Jeannot, or I want a guy like Sean Kuraly who can help my lineup as a winning team with culture and with character, that's also an option in play. It's just another option the Bruins have, not only picking off a bad team, but also being part of helping a good team get better.
Something Don Sweeney addressed today, I know it's the obvious one, but he seemed to make a point of emphasis to Jeremy Swayman and the distraction you guys mentioned, being signed, overpaid, and whatever, and settling in for Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. But that was such a distraction too. Jeremy Swayman has got to get his head in the right place. You're expecting different from him than the start of last season.
Yeah, and again, I said this all the time last season, and put aside the contract and everything else, it was going to be a hard year for Jeremy if everything went perfect in the contract negotiation. It was the first time he was the starting goalie. It was the first time he had the full reins of an organization. He was the guy in pro hockey ever. He didn't do it in Providence. He didn't do it in the NHL. Last year, it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult. The mindset's completely different, and he had to grow through that and work through that and struggle through that. That's just... Everybody does it. Every player does it, but every goaltender does it. Usually they do it in Providence where no one's watching. Jeremy had to do it not only in the NHL, but also with the expectations of the 8-year deal and the holdout and everything else. So I think wiping all of that clear, going through those tougher times, and coming into this season on the clean slate, goalies just always have a little bit of an up and down. That's what they do. It's so much circumstance related.
I have such an affinity for athletes that are just superbly confident in their own ability. And I put Jeremy Swayman in that category, which makes me really admire him because he has that much belief in himself. But this was an all-new pressure for him.
Yeah.
All new expectation, all new pressure. So it's about lessons learned. Did you learn your lesson from a year ago? And I think the first steps of that, comeback season and get back to where he is was probably the World Championships.
Yeah, and I don't. Usually you put nothing into that, right? Usually it's a post-tournament. Everyone there typically had a bad year. Yeah. Everybody had a bad year. They're just going over for the trip, But in Jeremy's case, it's something that a supremely confident kid can put his hat on and work, and it puts a good mind frame for the rest of the summer.
And you feel like yourself.
Listen,
you're like,
and he's going to come in though, but he's going to come, and the big thing is you come in hungrier. You do with the struggle that he had last year, and you go back to the mindset of I have to prove my worth in this league.
I just wonder if he was ever focused on the most important thing last summer, which is getting ready for the season. And because of everything going on around it, and there was a lot of talk
And there were
too
quotes
much,
that
too
kept
much.
getting circulated.
Right,
Exactly. the
Right.
big
So
quote.
now
Yeah,
he
yeah.
gets a chance to fully reset and fully say, I got to do this. I got to do this. This team needs him desperately. The other player, you talk about the World Championships. I mean, look, it's great for anybody you win. Winning's always fun, right? Hopefully for Mason Lowry, too. Hopefully that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that.
Even if this helps him just a little bit, that helps, hopefully, get him going.
And they extended him as well. Guys, we didn't really, we're going to end the show with just recapping all the recent moves. So we see Mason Lowry 2 times 3.2. Johnny Beecher, that's an interesting one. Murat Husnudinov, guys. So like we said, John Beecher 2 at just under $1 million at $900,000. He's competing. They're competing. Henry Jokiharju as well. They got that done 3 at 3. Can I ask about Jokiharju to you, Brick, and what you think about that? Because we didn't really spend a lot of time on defense there.
Yeah, there was some question as to whether they're going to get a deal done with this guy or not. He played pretty decent when he came over to Boston at the end of the year. Is he a top 4 defenseman on a Stanley Cup contending team? I don't know. I don't see it just yet. I think I need to see some major growth in his game to convince me that he's that right shot top 4 defenseman that's going to be, look out for the Boston Bruins because they're deep on the blue line.
Guys?
A dearth of right shot defenders, right?
He probably would have got 5 on the open market today. Which is right. If he goes open market, the right-handed defenseman, there's nobody out there, and he was in a great point of leverage. But the Bruins were able to get the deal done with the 3 years.
All right. Well, you guys mentioned that this is the start, or we all know this is the start of free agency, but the Bruins could still be in the trade market. We have about 90 seconds. Let's recap, or let's finish with the head coach. I know that's not what we're talking about today with free agency, but we are talking big picture of the Boston Bruins. Now, new head coach. We're going to see what Marco Sturm, what kind of work ethic. The power play is a big deal. Special teams. This is a fresh start. Even though there weren't crazy big splashes that the Bruins made, this is a fresh start, and we just have to wait to see how it fills up.
Well, I'm looking for 3 areas from the head coach. Establish that culture in the locker room. I think the Bruins did a nice job with quality people that they added to their roster today. But again, you got to have that core group and that leadership group in place, and it's got to be a room that we're all together.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1, he has to establish that. Number 2, he's got to reestablish that team defense.
Yeah.
They gave up too many soft, easy goals last year. This is a Bruins team that's supposed to own their own zone, and that's goaltending, but it's team defense that needs to improve. And then, of course, the big one is evolve the offense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we've got about 30 seconds left. I'm going to get up and Razor, I'll give you a hug. You're a Canadian. Happy Canada Day.
Yeah, happy Canada Day. I can't believe
I'm sorry
you did
for
that.
forgetting.
My mom will be so mad.
You know what we talk
especially
about?
because I'm living here
Billy,
already.
you and I should be hurt.
I'll hug you guys on the 4th, okay? On Thursday. Guys, thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Happy holidays.
Have a nice
Stay
trip
safe.
back home to Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll talk to you next time. Bye.